Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
Those Rockies, man, they get you every time. They reel you in with hope this could be the season. All that talk about raw talent. We've got some real potential here. The manager says every single year. It just depends on whether these guys want to make a career out of baseball. They've got the skills, but will they actually use them? Same old song and dance, and then they crush you. Well, Eric, it's like this. Those Bears are a really talented team. They've put it all together this season. What are they now, 33-22? We just need to keep improving, yada yada yada. Meanwhile, here I am, a season ticket holder, who forked over $3,125 for 65 home games at club level. Around me is the usual crowd of ticket holders, people I've come to know over the years. The club level's always a party. Plenty of food, plenty of booze, and we all take advantage. When the Rockies, Falcons, are losing, we drink to drown the sorrows. When they're winning, we drink to celebrate. Either way, there's drinking. Honestly, it's mostly just an excuse to get plastered. I drink to your health when we're together. I drink to your health when I'm alone. And I've drunk to your health so often lately, I'm starting to worry about my own. Somebody said that once. Don't ask me who, I was too drunk to remember. But I do remember laughing my butt off that night. The Falcons lost to the Dunes, 5-4. A real heartbreaker. But we made a party of it, a full-blown rager. By the time everyone else left, heading home with their girlfriends or wives, it was just me alone in the parking lot at midnight, 3 hours after the game ended, puking my guts out beside my truck. There I was, on my hands and knees, too drunk to stand, let alone walk, which meant, obviously, I had to drive. I couldn't even make it to a bus stop if I wanted to. Leaning against my truck, puke on my shirt, I fumbled for my keys. Of course, I dropped them right into my own vomit. That was pleasant. And then I heard voices, not close, more like background noise, cutting through the haze. A woman's voice, clear and professional. Chicago 131. I'm out with Illinois ADP 735. A blue Ford F-150 in the Falcons parking lot. Section B, space 203. Man down. Her voice broke through the fog in my head, and just like that, my night was about to take a very different turn. 131, Chicago, 10-4. Do you need backup? Chicago 131, negative at this time. Looks to be an intoxicated man trying to get in his vehicle. We advise. I saw the pretty red and blue lights swirling all around me. I saw this hot-looking female cop walking toward me, flashlight in hand, shining on and around me. My body and head were leaning back on my pickup. I was helpless. Couldn't get up. I just couldn't do much of anything except look. What do we have here? The cop asked. You've been drinking at the Falcons game tonight? Maybe. A little, I replied, sounding surprisingly sober, or so I thought. Looks like you threw up all over yourself, sir. Do you have any identification? Yes, ma'am, I slurred. I reached for my back pocket to get my wallet and fell over, hitting my head on the pavement. "'Kay, never mind. They'll get it. Is it in here, in your pocket?" she asked. "Uh-huh," I said, my cheek lying in a puddle of cold vomit. "Okay, Mr. Ethan Gregory Blake," Officer Samantha Turner said. "Can you stand up?" "I don't think so," I replied. "Ethan, you are way too drunk to drive or be out in public. You are a danger to yourself, so I am going to have a transport vehicle come take you to the drunk tank and let you dry out for the night," she told me. "No, take me drunk. I think I'm home," I begged. She laughed. "No, Ethan. You'd stink up my cruiser, and I have to live in that thing tonight. So you'll be okay, just hang on." I woke up in a foul-smelling 15 by 15 cell with 10 other drunks who had puked on themselves, pissed their pants, and generally made messes of themselves. Of course, I didn't need to be treated like this. I had money. I'm not a common drunk. Just because I'd ruined my clothes doesn't mean I'm like them. My head hurt so bad I wondered if I had a hemorrhage. My cotton mouth was so dry I'd have considered drinking toilet water. The dried vomit on my clothes, face, and hands was repulsive. If I could ever find a shower, I might never leave it. Around 9 a.m., they opened the cell and processed us out. I was miles from my pickup, out on the streets outside the Chicago City Jail, with no way to get anywhere except walking. When they gave me back the contents of my pockets at the time of arrest, I had my wallet with $475 in cash, credit cards, an ID, my keys, a pocket knife, and a half-eaten pack of mints. I shoved all the mints into my mouth at once and started the mushy walk down the street toward Riversdale. I stopped at a convenience store along the way to buy a bottle of juice, but the clerk refused to serve me because I looked and smelled so bad. No cab would have me either. I was going to have to walk. Maybe I could catch a bus. Then the strangest thing happened. The cop who had arrested me, Officer Samantha Turner, pulled up in her personal car, honked, and got out wearing street clothes. "Ethan, let me give you a ride back to your truck," she said. "Just don't touch anything in my car. I've got an old newspaper on the seat. Sit on that and let's go." I looked at her like a clueless fool staring at a locked door. "Come on, get in," she urged. "Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am," I said. "I'm afraid I need a shower. I'm sorry about smelling up your car. We'll just roll down the windows," she replied with a smirk. "Ethan, do you know what you said to me last night while we were waiting for the transport van?" Not really. I hope I didn't insult you," I replied. "No," she said, laughing. "You said, 'Take me drunk. I think I'm home.'" "I guess I got a little mixed up," I said, sheepishly. "Anyhow, I got to thinking about the irony of your statement. Kind of funny on the surface, but tragic underneath. I've been thinking about you all night. You're a young guy, good-looking, and have money in your pocket. Where are you headed?" "I just want to get my car, officer." "Thanks for the ride," I deflected. "Ethan, I got off at 7 a.m., then dragged my butt out of bed at 9:30 to be here for your release. And I'm going to ask you to talk to me," she insisted. "I'm just hungover, had a big party after the Falcons game last night. That's all," I said. "I checked your record," she continued. "You've had 1 DUI, 1 arrest for public intoxication, and 1 arrest for fighting. I imagine that if you've been arrested, you've gotten away several times for each one. Do you have a wife, parents, family?" "Nah, I'm alone," I admitted. "Caught my wife in our bed with another man. That was more than I could handle. So I divorced her. Other than that, nobody." "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry to hear that," she said genuinely. "But you need to get over it. You can't throw your life away just because she let you down. You're young, good-looking, and you have a lot going for you. Here we are, your truck. Ethan, if you want to get some help, I can give you a name and a number," she offered, pulling a piece of paper from her purse. She scribbled something on it and pressed it into my hand. "Call this number before you take your next drink. Ethan. Someone who can help you will answer," she said firmly. "Okay. Thanks," I said, barely glancing at the paper. "Thanks again for the ride." I was glad to get the ride, but even more glad to get away from all the "you need help" talk. Still, I couldn't ignore how deeply her words stuck with me. I needed to clean the seat of my truck before I used it again, and I definitely needed to get home and take a shower. When I got home, I peeled off the nasty clothes and finally got under the hot water. The shower washed away the chunks of puke, the sour sweat, and the mashed remnants from between my cheeks and down the back of my legs. I thought about what a mess I'd made of my life. Since I divorced Amy, I'd been wandering aimlessly. The drinking had gotten worse. No purpose, no direction, just empty nights and regret-filled mornings. This wasn't acceptable. I couldn't keep living like this. After the shower, I fixed myself a proper breakfast: bacon, eggs, biscuits, and gravy. I drank a quart of orange juice, hoping to drown out the lingering hangover. As I sat there eating, I glanced at the piece of paper Officer Turner had given me. It was just a phone number, no name, nothing else. When I was growing up, I always thought that if someone cared enough to confront you about your problems, it was worth taking a hard look at yourself. I owed it to myself to listen, at least. I stared at the paper for a long moment, then picked up my phone and dialed. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. Officer Turner? This is Ethan." "Ethan Blake," I stammered. "Ethan, I didn't think you'd call. I'm surprised you called so soon." "Made a decision, have you?" she asked, her tone warm but firm. "You were right," I admitted. "Everything you said, it hit home. I called this number to see about a program or something." "Ethan," she said softly, "there's something special about you. I'm not licensed to treat you, and I'm not a professional counselor. I'm just a cop. I became a cop to help people, but most of the time, it's just processing crimes, chasing criminals, and doing paperwork. But last night, when I met you, I knew I had to help. Why me? I asked, genuinely confused. Because I think you're worth saving, she said without hesitation. Let's meet up and talk. I'll help you figure this out. Okay, I replied hesitantly. When and where? How about tomorrow morning? There's a diner on Belmont Avenue called Sunrise Cafe. It's quiet and they have great coffee. Let's meet there at 9, she suggested. All right, I agreed, still unsure of what to expect. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early. I wasn't sure why, but I felt nervous. More nervous than I'd been in a long time. I parked my truck in the small lot and walked in. Officer Turner was already there, sitting at a booth by the window sipping coffee. She looked different in casual clothes, more approachable, less intimidating. Ethan, she said, standing up to greet me with a warm smile. Thanks for coming. Hi, I replied, sliding into the booth across from her. The waitress came by and I ordered coffee. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. So, tell me, she began, leaning forward slightly. What's going on? Why do you think you've been drinking so much? I hesitated, staring down at the table. I guess it started after my dad died, I admitted. He was shot by one of his clients, some guy who lost everything and blamed him for it. After that, it just felt like everything started falling apart. She nodded, listening intently. And your mom? She died 6 years ago, I said. Cancer. Her expression softened. I'm so sorry, Ethan. That's a lot to deal with. Yeah, I muttered. Then there was Amy, my ex-wife. Found her in bed with another guy, and that was it for me. After that, I just started drinking more. It's easier than dealing with everything. But it's not helping, is it? She asked gently. I shook my head. No, it's just making things worse. Ethan, you're not alone in this, she said, her tone firm but kind. A lot of people have been through what you're going through, and they've come out the other side. You can too. But you have to want it. You have to decide you're done living like this. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. I think I want to try, I said quietly. That's a good start, she said with a smile. Let's take it one step at a time. I know a counselor who specializes in addiction. I'll set you up with an appointment and we'll go from there. You'll help me? I asked, surprised. Of course, she replied. You're not alone in this, Ethan. We sat there for another hour, talking about everything. My past, my struggles, and what might come next. For the first time in years, I felt like someone actually cared. Over the next few weeks, Samantha helped me start the process of putting my life back together. She introduced me to a counselor named Dr. Harris, who specialized in addiction and trauma. At first, I was skeptical, but Dr. Harris turned out to be exactly what I needed. He was straightforward but compassionate, pushing me to confront the things I had been running from for years. I started attending group meetings for people struggling with alcohol addiction. At first, I hated it, sitting in a circle with strangers, sharing my deepest problems. But the more I went, the more I realized that these people understood what I was going through in a way no one else could. Their stories mirrored my own, and for the first time, I didn't feel so alone. Samantha checked in with me regularly. Sometimes we'd meet for coffee. Other times, she'd just call to see how I was doing. Her support was constant and unwavering, and it made all the difference. About a month into my recovery, I went to my first Falcons game since that night in the parking lot. This time, I went with a clear head and without a drink in my hand. It was strange at first, being in that environment without alcohol, but it also felt good. I could actually enjoy the game, focus on the plays, and cheer without needing a buzz to do it. After the game, as I walked back to my truck, I thought about how far I'd come in such a short time. I wasn't fixed, far from it, but I was making progress, and that was something. A few days later, Samantha called me. Hey, Ethan, she said. How's it going? Pretty good, I replied. Just got back from a meeting. That's great. I'm proud of you, she said warmly. Listen, I was wondering if you'd want to grab dinner sometime. Not as a cop and a guy she arrested, but as friends. I was caught off guard. Dinner? Yeah, sure. That'd be nice. Great, she said. How about Friday night? There's a little Italian place downtown I think you'd like. Sounds good, I said, trying to sound casual even though my heart was pounding. That Friday, I met Samantha at the restaurant. She was waiting for me outside, wearing a simple black dress and a warm smile. Hey, I said, feeling suddenly self-conscious in my jeans and button-up shirt. Hey, she replied, her eyes lighting up. Dinner was easy and comfortable. We talked about everything: sports, movies, books, and even a little about my recovery. She told me more about herself, too. She'd grown up in a small town in Montana, the youngest of 5 siblings. Her dad was a coal miner, and her mom ran a cleaning business. She joined the police force because she wanted to make a difference, and despite the challenges, she loved her job. As the night went on, I realized how much I enjoyed being around her. She was smart, funny, and incredibly kind. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting to connect with someone on a deeper level. When we said goodnight, she gave me a hug and said, "I'm glad you're doing this, Ethan. You're stronger than you think." Those words stayed with me long after I drove home. After that night, Samantha and I started spending more time together. It wasn't anything official, just casual dinners, coffee after my meetings, or the occasional hike on weekends. She had a way of making me feel at ease, like I didn't have to pretend to be anything other than what I was. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. My recovery was far from linear, though. There were days when I felt on top of the world, and then there were nights when the cravings were almost unbearable. One Friday night, after a particularly hard week, I found myself pacing in my living room, staring at the half-empty bottle of whiskey I'd forgotten to throw out. My fingers itched to grab it, just for one sip, one small escape. Before I could act on the impulse, I picked up my phone and called Samantha. "Hey, Ethan," she said, answering on the first ring. "What's up?" I need a distraction," I admitted, my voice shaky. "It's not good tonight." "Stay put," she said immediately. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. True to her word, she showed up not long after, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a bag of microwave popcorn and a stack of DVDs. "Movie night," she declared as she walked in, her no-nonsense attitude leaving no room for argument. "You picked the first one." I couldn't help but laugh. "Samantha Turner, the cop who arrests drunks and makes them watch rom-coms? Only the really stubborn ones," she shot back with a grin. We ended up watching an old action movie, laughing at the cheesy dialogue and over-the-top stunts. By the end of the night, the bottle of whiskey was still sitting untouched on the counter, and I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. As the weeks turned into months, Samantha became a constant in my life. She wasn't just a friend or a mentor. She was something more, though neither of us had said it out loud. The connection between us was growing, but we both seemed hesitant to take that next step. One evening, after a group meeting, I asked her to come with me to the diner we'd gone to the first time we'd met up. Over coffee and pie, I finally worked up the courage to say what had been on my mind for weeks. "Sam," I began, nervously playing with the edge of my napkin, "I don't think I've ever thanked you properly for everything you've done for me." She looked at me, her expression soft but serious. "Ethan, you don't have to thank me. You've done the hard work. I've just been here to cheer you on." "It's more than that," I insisted. "You didn't have to help me. You didn't have to care. But you did, and it's made all the difference." She smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Well, you're worth it." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sam," I said quietly, "I think I'm falling for you." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, I thought I'd made a huge mistake. But then she squeezed my hand and said, "Ethan, I think I'm falling for you too." From that point on, our relationship shifted. It wasn't easy. She was cautious, and I was still finding my footing in recovery, but we took it one day at a time. Samantha was patient with me, and I learned to open up in ways I never had before. Recovery wasn't just about staying sober anymore. It was about building a life worth staying sober for that as our relationship deepened. I started to realize how much I wanted to rebuild my life. Not just for myself, but for Samantha too. Her belief in me gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, and I didn't want to let her down. One night, as we sat on the couch in her apartment watching an old baseball game replay, she looked over at me with a thoughtful expression. "Ethan," she began, "have you thought about what's next for you? Like beyond recovery?" I paused, caught off guard. "You mean like a job? Or something bigger?" "Both," she said, leaning back against the cushions. "You've come so far, but I think you're ready to start thinking about what kind of life you want to build for yourself. What makes you happy? What do you want to do?" It was a question I hadn't allowed myself to ask in a long time. For so long, my life had been about survival, getting through each day without falling back into old habits. But now, for the first time, I realized I had the chance to dream again. "I've been thinking about it," I admitted. "I used to love working with my hands, building things, fixing things. My dad and I used to restore old cars together before. You know." Samantha nodded, encouraging me to continue. "I was thinking maybe I could open a shop," I said, the idea taking shape as I spoke. "Restoring old cars, maybe doing custom work. It's something I'd enjoy, and it would keep me busy." She smiled, her eyes lighting up. "That's a great idea, Ethan. You're passionate about it, and it would give you something to be proud of. I think you should go for it." With her encouragement, I started making plans. Over the next few months, I found a small garage space for rent on the outskirts of town and began turning it into a workshop. Samantha helped me paint the walls and set up the equipment, and little by little it started to feel like mine. Opening day was a quiet affair. Just a few friends and some curious locals stopping by to check out the new business. But it felt like a milestone, a symbol of how far I'd come. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real. Samantha was there every step of the way, cheering me on and helping me navigate the challenges of starting a business. We were a team, and our bond only grew stronger as we faced each new obstacle together. One evening, as we sat in the garage after hours, the faint smell of oil and fresh paint hanging in the air, I turned to her and said, "I don't know where I'd be without you, Sam." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "You'd be right here, Ethan. You just needed someone to remind you of what you're capable of." As the months turned into years, the garage became more than just a business. It became a symbol of my recovery, a place where I could channel my energy and creativity into something positive. Samantha and I grew closer with each passing day, and eventually, I knew it was time to take the next step. On a crisp autumn evening, I planned a surprise for her. After closing up the shop, I led her to the back, where I'd set up a small table with candles, flowers, and a homemade dinner. She looked at me in surprise, her eyes shining. "What's all this?" she asked with a laugh. "Just a little something for you," I said, pulling out her chair. As we ate, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for how far we'd come. When dinner was over, I stood up and reached into my pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "Sam," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "you came into my life when I was at my lowest and helped me find my way back. You've believed in me, stood by me, and made me a better man. I can't imagine my life without you." I opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan. Of course, yes." Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by close friends and family. It wasn't flashy or elaborate, but it was perfect. As we exchanged vows, I couldn't help but think about how much my life had changed since that night in the parking lot. Samantha had saved me, in every way that mattered, and now we were starting a new chapter together. Married life with Samantha felt like a fresh start. We settled into a rhythm that was both steady and fulfilling. The garage was thriving, attracting customers from all over the state, and Samantha had recently been promoted to a detective sergeant. Life wasn't without its challenges, but we faced them together, and that made all the difference. One sunny Saturday morning, Samantha walked into the garage, her badge tucked into her pocket and a cup of coffee in her hand. "Busy day?" she asked, leaning against the workbench as I wiped grease off my hands. A few projects, I said, gesturing toward a classic Mustang I was working on. What about you? Any big cases? She sighed and shook her head. Nothing I can talk about, unfortunately. But you know how it is. I smiled. I do. But you're good at what you do, Sam. You'll crack it. She gave me a warm look, the kind that made me realize how lucky I was to have her in my life. That night, as we sat on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us, Samantha turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Ethan, she said, have you ever thought about giving back? You've come so far, I think your story could inspire people. What do you mean? I asked, curious. I mean, talking to others who are struggling with addiction, she explained. Sharing your journey, showing them that it's possible to turn things around. You've got so much to offer, and I think you could make a real difference. The idea stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started looking into local addiction recovery programs and speaking opportunities. The first time I shared my story was nerve-wracking, but as I stood in front of a room full of people who were fighting the same battle I had, I felt an incredible sense of purpose. After that, I began volunteering at meetings, mentoring individuals who were just starting their recovery journeys. It wasn't always easy. Some people weren't ready to change, and others relapsed despite their best efforts. But the moments of progress, when someone found hope or reached a milestone, made it all worthwhile. Samantha often joined me at these events, offering her own perspective as someone who had been on the outside looking in. Together, we became a team not just in our marriage, but in our mission to help others. A year later, Samantha came home with exciting news. Guess what? She said, practically bouncing with energy. What's up? I asked, looking up from the papers I was sorting at the kitchen table. I got a call from the mayor's office, she said. They want me to head up a new task force on community policing and outreach programs. It's a big deal, Ethan. They're focusing on rebuilding trust between the police and the community. I grinned. That's amazing, Sam. You're perfect for it. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, wrapping her arms around me. You've shown me what it means to truly help people, and I want to do the same. Our lives became a balance of work, volunteering, and spending time with each other. The garage continued to grow, and I hired a small team to help with the workload. Samantha's task force gained recognition for its innovative approach, and she quickly became a respected leader in her field. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sun set, I turned to her and said, You know, Sam, I never thought life could be this good. You've given me more than I ever thought I deserved. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. You did the work, Ethan. I was just the spark. But I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Years later, as we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the garage, surrounded by friends, family, and customers who had become like family, I looked at Samantha and felt a deep sense of gratitude. My life had taken a turn I never could have predicted, and it all started with one moment of kindness from a cop who saw more in me than I saw in myself. To second chances, I said, raising a glass of sparkling water as Samantha beamed beside me. To second chances, she echoed, clinking her glass against mine. And in that moment, I knew I had found my home. Not just in the life we had built, but in the love that had saved me as the years went by. Samantha and I built a life that was solid and full of meaning. The garage continued to grow, becoming not just a business but a gathering place for the community. It wasn't uncommon to see old friends, neighbors, and even some of my recovery group members stopping by just to chat or lend a hand. The garage was thriving, but more importantly, it was a symbol of the new life I'd created. Samantha's career also took off. Her work with the Community Policing Task Force earned her numerous accolades and even national attention. She was invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing her strategies for bridging the gap between law enforcement and the people they serve. Watching her stand on stage, commanding a room with her intelligence and passion, always filled me with pride. One evening, after she returned from a particularly long day, she sat down at the dinner table, looking more thoughtful than usual. You okay, Sam? I asked, setting a plate of grilled chicken in front of her. Yeah, she said, but her tone suggested she was deep in thought. I've been offered a new position. It's a big one. What kind of position? I asked, curious. Chief of Police, she said, her voice steady but her expression uncertain. It's a huge step, Ethan. It's something I've worked for my whole career, but I don't know if I'm ready for it, or if it's the right move for us. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sam, you're more than ready. You've been ready for years. But what matters most is what you want. If it's not the right time, that's okay. But if it is, I'll support you every step of the way. She smiled, squeezing my hand. You always know what to say. After a few days of deliberation, Samantha accepted the position, becoming one of the youngest police chiefs in the state's history. The transition wasn't without its challenges. She faced resistance from some, skepticism from others, but her unwavering dedication and vision quickly won people over. Meanwhile, I continued to expand the garage, eventually opening a second location. I hired a team of apprentices, many of whom were young people in recovery, giving them a chance to learn a trade and rebuild their lives, just as I had. The garage became a hub for second chances, and seeing the transformations in the people who worked there was one of the most rewarding parts of my life. One summer evening, a few years into Samantha's role as chief of police, we sat on the back porch of our home, watching the fireflies blink in the warm twilight. Ethan, she said, breaking the comfortable silence, have you ever thought about what comes next? For us? I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? We've done so much here, she said. But I keep thinking, there's more we could do, more people we could help. What if we started something together? A foundation, maybe, something that combines what you've done with the garage and what I've learned in law enforcement. We could focus on helping people transition out of addiction, out of tough situations, and into stable, productive lives. The idea sparked something in me. A foundation? That's big, I said, mulling it over. But it's a great idea. You think we could pull it off? She grinned. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're better together. I think we can do anything. Over the next year, we worked tirelessly to launch the Turner Blake Foundation. Combining my experience in recovery and her expertise in law enforcement, the foundation focused on providing resources, training, and support for people looking to rebuild their lives. We partnered with local businesses, community organizations, and even the police department to create a network of opportunities for those in need. The foundation quickly gained traction, and before long it was making a real impact. We hosted workshops, funded scholarships, and even opened a transitional housing program for people recovering from addiction or coming out of the criminal justice system. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, funding challenges, and moments of doubt, but we pushed through, knowing the work was worth it. Samantha often joked that we were busier than ever, but neither of us would have had it any other way. We found purpose in the work, and that purpose only strengthened our bond. One day, as we stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Foundation's new community center, I looked over at Samantha, who was beaming with pride. "Look at what we've built," I said, my voice full of awe. She turned to me, her eyes shining. "We didn't just build this, Ethan. We built a life, together." And she was right. Our journey had been anything but easy, but every challenge, every setback, had led us to this moment. Standing there, surrounded by the people whose lives we had touched, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Samantha, but for the second chance she had given me. The Turner Blake Foundation became a beacon of hope for the community. It wasn't just about providing resources. It was about creating a space where people could rebuild, connect, and thrive. Samantha and I poured our hearts into it, balancing our respective careers while dedicating every spare moment to growing the foundation. As the years passed, we began to see the ripple effect of our work. People who had come through the program were now thriving, owning businesses, supporting their families, and even volunteering to help others in need. The success stories were countless, and they fueled our passion to keep pushing forward. One evening, as we were wrapping up a fundraiser gala for the foundation, Samantha pulled me aside. She was dressed elegantly, her hair pinned up, and the glow in her eyes matched the warmth in her smile. "Ethan," she said softly, "do you ever think about how far we've come?" I smiled, taking her hand. "Every day, Sam. Every single day. I've been thinking," she continued, "about what it means to leave a legacy. We've done so much here, but I think it's time to dream even bigger. Bigger? I asked, intrigued. What do you have in mind? She hesitated for a moment, then said national, maybe even global. What if we expanded the foundation beyond our city, beyond the state? There are so many people out there who need help, so many communities that could benefit from what we've built. The idea was overwhelming, but as I looked into her determined eyes, I knew she was serious. Samantha had always been a visionary, and her passion for helping others was contagious. If anyone can do it, it's you, I said, squeezing her hand. Let's do it together. Over the next few years, we worked tirelessly to expand the foundation's reach. We opened satellite centers in nearby cities, partnering with local leaders to adapt our programs to each community's unique needs. Samantha traveled across the country, meeting with law enforcement officials, community organizers, and government agencies to build a network of support. I focused on the operational side, working with our growing team to ensure the foundation's programs remained effective and sustainable. It wasn't always easy. There were challenges at every turn, from funding shortages to logistical hurdles, but we faced them together, just as we always had. The foundation's impact continued to grow, and before long, we were receiving national recognition. Samantha was invited to speak at conferences and summits around the world, sharing our approach to community-driven change. I often joined her, and together, we became a team not just in our work but in our advocacy for a better, more compassionate world. One night, after returning from a trip to Washington, D.C., Samantha and I sat on the back porch of our home, gazing at the stars. The air was cool, and the faint chirping of crickets filled the silence. "Do you ever miss the simpler days?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. I chuckled. "Sometimes. But then I think about all the people we've helped, all the lives we've touched, and I can't imagine going back." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Me neither. It's just, sometimes I wonder if we'll ever feel like we've done enough." I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "We've done more than most people do in a lifetime, Sam. And we're not done yet. But even if we stop tomorrow, I'd still consider this life we've built the greatest success of all." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with emotion. "You're my greatest success, Ethan. Everything we've done started because you chose to fight for your life, and you let me fight alongside you." Years later, as we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Turner Blake Foundation, surrounded by friends, family, and the countless people whose lives had been changed by our work, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Samantha stood by my side, her hand in mine, as we listened to the stories of hope and transformation shared by those we had helped. As the night drew to a close, she turned to me and said, I always thought I'd be the one helping others. I never realized how much they'd end up helping me." I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "That's the magic of it, Sam. The more you give, the more you get in return." And in that moment, I knew we had built something that would outlast us. A legacy of love, resilience, and second chances. Together, we had not only changed our own lives but also the lives of countless others, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path forward. As the years passed, the Turner Blake Foundation became a lasting legacy, an institution known not just for its programs, but for the hope it inspired in countless communities. Samantha and I slowly stepped back from day-to-day operations, trusting the dedicated team we had built to carry the vision forward. It wasn't easy to let go, but we knew that the foundation was bigger than either of us. It had become a movement. In our later years, Samantha and I moved to a quieter home in the countryside. The hustle and bustle of city life had been thrilling, but we craved a slower pace. We still stayed connected to the foundation, serving as advisors and attending key events, but we also found time to focus on ourselves, something we hadn't done in decades. One crisp fall evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samantha and I sat on the porch swing, watching the golden leaves flutter to the ground. She leaned against me, her warmth a constant comfort. "Ethan," she said softly, "do you ever think about that night in the parking lot? The night I found you?" I smiled, the memory vivid in my mind. "I think about it all the time. If you hadn't stopped, I don't know where I'd be, or if I'd even still be here." She shook her head gently. "You give me too much credit. You chose to change your life. I just gave you a little nudge. A little nudge? I chuckled. Sam, you turned my whole world upside down. And I'll never stop being grateful for that. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. I'm grateful for you too, Ethan. You taught me how to believe in people, how to love fully and without fear. We saved each other, didn't we? I nodded, my voice thick with emotion. We did. And we built a life I never could have imagined. We sat there in comfortable silence, the weight of our shared journey settling around us like a warm blanket. The stars began to peek through the twilight sky, and the air was filled with the faint hum of crickets and rustling leaves. In the years that followed, the Turner Blake Foundation continued to thrive, expanding its reach to new cities and countries. The stories of hope and resilience it inspired became a source of pride for Samantha and me, a reminder of what can happen when you choose to believe in second chances. We spent our days tending to the garden, hosting family and friends, and occasionally visiting the foundation to see the incredible work being done. Life slowed down, but it never lost its meaning. One evening, as we celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by friends, family, and the people whose lives we had touched, Samantha raised a glass. Her voice, steady and full of warmth, carried across the room. To love, she said, to second chances, and to the life we build when we choose hope over fear. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and as I looked at her, standing tall and radiant beside me, I felt a surge of gratitude so profound it brought tears to my eyes. She was my partner, my anchor, and my greatest gift. As the celebration wound down and the last guests departed, we sat together on the porch swing once more, watching the stars. Samantha rested her head on my shoulder, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Do you think we did enough?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, smiling. "More than enough. We built something that will outlive us, Sam. We gave people hope, and we loved each other through it all. What more could we ask for?" She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're right, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it." We sat there, wrapped in the quiet of the night, the weight of our years together settling gently around us. The stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter, as if reflecting the light we had found in each other. And in that moment, I knew our story wasn't just about second chances. It was about choosing to love, to fight, and to build a life worth living. Together, we had created a legacy that would carry on long after the stars faded, and that was more than enough.